Hello there everyone, my name is David Luchford and welcome to lesson 30 of my Ancient Greek course. Today's lesson is on prepositions, but before we talk about what prepositions are exactly, let's take a look at my virtual sets of shelves. If we look at my most recent set of shelves, we shall see that this week, Chu Yang has bought me a virtual amphora, and so has Isaac. So thank you very much for that, Chu Yang and Isaac. I'm very grateful for your support. And I'm very grateful for everyone who has supported my channel in the past also. Now, if you would like to add a virtual amphora or virtual amphorae to my virtual set of shelves, then you can do so by going to the link in the description below. But let's now talk about prepositions. What are prepositions exactly? Well, prepositions are words that apply to nouns or pronouns and indicate relations in terms of space. For example, the word towards is a preposition in that category. Or secondly, they can indicate relations in terms of time. The word after is a preposition in that category. And thirdly, they can indicate relations in terms of something more abstract, such as causation. Because of would be a preposition in that category. So overall, prepositions are words that apply to nouns or pronouns and indicate relations in terms of space, time, or something more abstract like causation. The next thing to note about prepositions is that in Greek, a preposition governs a case. That is to say, the noun or pronoun that a preposition applies to goes in a particular case. Moreover, this word normally goes right after the preposition. So the word that a preposition applies to will go in a particular case. That is the case that the preposition governs or takes. And the word that the preposition applies to typically comes right after it, as it does in English. For example, we would say, towards the city. The phrase the city, which the preposition is applying to, is coming right after the word towards. We call that word that the preposition applies to the prepositional object. And in Greek, that prepositional object will need to be in the case that the preposition governs or takes. To illustrate this point that prepositions govern particular cases in Greek, the preposition en, meaning in or on, governs the dative. So the noun or pronoun that it applies to, which we call the prepositional object, goes in the dative, and normally goes right after it, in terms of the position of the word in the sentence. So for example, you could see the phrase en te oikiai, meaning in the house. Now, here we have the preposition en, and then we have the prepositional object directly following it, and it's in the dative case, because en governs the dative. Let's now look at a second example. Here we have the phrase en te pole, meaning in the city. Once again, we have the preposition en followed by a dative phrase. This is the prepositional object. It is the thing that something is in or on. Since it's a city, we would say in the city. Here's a third example, en toi ore, meaning on the mountain or on the hill. Once again, we have en followed by a dative, since en governs the dative. Now, the next thing to note is that some prepositions can only govern one case. Okay, so for example, en can only govern the dative. That means the prepositional object of en will always be in the dative case. However, most prepositions can govern more than one case, and their meaning usually differs depending on which case they govern. For example, let's look at the preposition pros. Pros plus the accusative means to or towards. So pros can govern the accusative, and when it does, it means to or towards, or at least those are two of the meanings that it can have when governing the accusative. Prepositions can have plenty of meanings. I'm just giving you some of the most important ones here. But pros can also govern the genitive. And when it governs the genitive, it can mean from. And that from is often from a person. So pros will go in the genitive and it will mean from, and the person that something is coming from will go after it in the genitive case. And in addition, pros can also govern the dative. And when it governs the dative, it can mean at or near. So you can see that pros is capable of governing the accusative, genitive, or dative, and its meaning differs according to the case which it governs. And while I'm here talking about pros governing these cases, let me say that the accusative, genitive, and dative are the only cases that a preposition can govern, okay? A preposition can't govern the nominative. It will either govern just the accusative, just the genitive, just the dative, or a combination of these, potentially all three, like pros. So overall then, most prepositions in Greek can govern more than one case. So what do you need to learn because of that? Well, because of this, you need to learn which cases a preposition can govern and what it means when it governs each of these cases, as we just saw with pros. Now I have a tip for you here. The idea of case feel can help us to remember the meanings that some prepositions have when they govern particular cases. So let's talk about case feel. The idea of case feel is the idea that each case has a particular feel to it. It's kind of similar to the basic use of a case, but case feel is kind of a vaguer idea, and it's that each case, when it's used with a preposition, is used with that preposition because there is a particular feel to that case that makes it the appropriate case to use with that particular preposition. So, to illustrate this, the case feel of the accusative is meant to be motion towards. Or, if we're going to envision the case feels using an image, you could picture the accusative case as an arrow, okay? As a vector. The case feel of the accusative is motion towards. The case feel of the genitive is motion away from. And there we could picture something like a circle with an arrow coming out of it, okay? Now, the dative has the case feel of position, and there we could picture perhaps just a dot. In terms of nothing's moving, one thing is just at a certain place. Now we're going to look at some key prepositions in just a moment, and when we do, you will recognise these case feels when we look at which cases they govern and their meanings, at least for some of them. You won't see it in all of them, because this doesn't help us to remember the meanings of every preposition, but you will see a pattern there, okay? If you remember that the feel of the accusative is motion towards something, that the feel of the genitive is motion away from something, and that the feel of the dative is position, then that will help you to remember at least some of these meanings. So let's take a look at some key prepositions, and we shall see those case feels reflected in their meanings. The first preposition is apo, which governs the genitive and means from or away from. So there we do see the case feel of the genitive, in that the case feel of the genitive is motion away from something. Remember, it's a circle with an arrow going out of it, and therefore we see that with apo. Apo governs the genitive, it means from or away from. And apo, for your reference, can only govern the genitive, okay? It strictly takes or governs the genitive alone. Let's look at another one. Here we have the preposition dia plus the accusative, meaning because of or on account of. There we don't really see the case feel of the accusative. So that's one that it doesn't really help us with. But we do have to remember that dia plus the accusative means because of or on account of. However, dia can not only govern the accusative, it can also govern the genitive. And if you have dia plus the genitive, then it means through. And there we do see the case feel of the genitive in terms of if we picture that image of a circle with an arrow coming out of it, then you could envision that as something going through something else. Even though it doesn't have the formal feel of motion away from something, it does match up with the image that we picture for the case feel of the genitive, because it looks like the arrow is going through the circle. Next is the preposition ace, which governs the accusative and means into or to. There we do see the case feel of the accusative. The accusative case feel is motion towards something, and ace means into or to. The next one is ek or ex plus the genitive, meaning from or out of. And once again we see the case feel of the genitive here in that if we picture a circle with an arrow coming out of it, then that is reflected here when we say from or out of. And now the reason there are two forms of this preposition is because the second one, ex, using xi, is used if the next word begins in a vowel. And it gives us words like exit and exodus and expel and so forth. All of those things involve going out of somewhere. The next one is n plus the dative, meaning in or on. We've already met n, and we can see that it fits in with that idea of case feel that I've just taught you, because the case feel of the dative is a dot, namely position, and in or on is just specifying the position of something. When it's with the dative, it doesn't mean into, which uses motion. It just means in or on in terms of where that thing is located. And as I've said, n only ever governs the dative. I forgot to mention that ek/ex only ever governs the genitive, and ace only ever governs the accusative. Let's look at the next one. Meta plus the accusative means after. Now I'm not sure if we can construe that as fitting in with the idea of an arrow or a vector or motion towards, but we do need to learn that meta plus the accusative means after. However, meta plus the genitive means with. So you can see the meaning does differ quite a lot there based upon which case it governs. And here case feel doesn't really help us because I don't think either of the case feels, the accusative one or the genitive one, are reflected in the meanings here, at least not clearly. Meta can also govern the dative, but we shall see that in the future, not just yet. Pros governs the accusative, as we know, and it means to or towards when it governs the accusative. There we do see the case feel of the accusative reflected in the meaning, since the accusative is an arrow or motion towards in terms of the feel. Pros means to or towards. How about pros plus the genitive? Well, that means from, often a person, and that does fit in with the genitive case feel, in that the genitive case feel is motion away from something, so it fits in with the feel there. And pros plus the dative, meaning at or near, also fits in with the case feel of the dative, because the case feel of the dative is position, it's a dot visually, and if you're saying that something is at somewhere or near somewhere, you're saying that is its position. It's located there specifically. Anyway, here are 7 key Greek prepositions. We shall meet more in the next lesson, but please do pause the video and note these down, and make sure you note down which case each of these governs and what it means when it governs that case. Okay, let's now do some practice with prepositions. I've devised 10 Greek sentences for you which use prepositions. I've put 5 here and 5 on the next slide. Now, there is one word which is underlined and you can find its meaning in the word bank. The only other thing that I need to note to you about these is the fact that in number 5, you will see that we have the repeated article construction. The repeated article construction is not only used to deploy a genitive phrase, it can also be used to deploy a prepositional phrase. So the prepositional phrase pros tu nautu is applying to the noun that was mentioned before, okay? In the same way that a genitive deployed via the repeated article construction is applying to the noun that was mentioned when the article was first used. Please do pause the video and translate these 5 sentences into English. And here are the other 5 sentences for you. There are some more words that are underlined here and glossed in the word bank. The only thing that I need to mention here is in the first one, the word ara, used to indicate a yes or no question when it appears at the start of a sentence, has lost the second alpha. The reason for that is because of what we call elision. Because the next word begins in a vowel, this alpha has dropped out. And you can see there's an apostrophe in its place, letting us know that it's been elided. But it is the word ara, just indicating a yes or no question. Anyway, please do pause the video and translate these sentences which use prepositions. Okay, let's now go through the 10 sentences. Number 1 is ho iatros ektes oikias baine. You should have translated this one as the doctor is going out of the house, or the doctor goes out of the house, or you could have said from the house. We know that it means this because the doctor is in the nominative singular, which we know from the form of the definite article and also from the ending. So he's doing the action. Next we had ek tes oikias. We had a prepositional phrase, a preposition plus the prepositional object. We know that ek means out of or from, and it governs the genitive. We see that genitive prepositional object here, tes oikias, the house. So this must mean from the house or out of the house. So we've got the doctor out of the house, and then we have baine. Bainor is the verb to go. Here it's baine because he, she, or it is going or goes, and we know who that he is since we have a nominative noun. We know it's the doctor. So therefore it was the doctor goes or is going out of or from the house. Number 2 is to ploion eiston limena play. You should have translated this one as the ship is sailing into the harbour, or you could have said to the harbour. We know that it means this because to ploion is either nominative or accusative singular. We need to look at the rest of the sentence to figure out which of those it actually is. But we know from the form of the article and the ending that it's either nominative or accusative singular. So we know the ship is either the subject or the direct object. Next we have a prepositional phrase. We have eis ton limena. Eis means into or to, and it governs the accusative. And here is that prepositional object in the accusative, ton limena, which means the harbour. We know limen is harbour. Here it's ton limena in the accusative, singular. So we've got the ship, into or to the harbour, and the verb is play. Now the verb pleor is the verb to sail, and it only contracts in some forms. Namely, it contracts with the endings that use epsilon. In other forms, it does not contract. It's a bit of a strange verb in that regard. Anyway, here it's play because he, she, or it is sailing. And now we can work out that the ship, which we saw at the start, must be doing the action. It is sailing. So the ship sails or is sailing into or to the harbour. Now the third one is hoi andres metaton gynaikon badis dousin. You should have translated this one as the men are walking with the women. We know that it means this because we have hoi andres, the men, in the nominative plural. Then we have meta ton gynaikon, prepositional phrase. Here meta is governing the genitive. So here meta must mean with. And the people that the action is being done with are ton gynaikon, namely the women, because here the women are in the genitive plural. If it was with the woman, it would be tes gynaikos, but because it's ton gynaikon, it's plural. So the men with the women, and we've got badizdusin. Badizdo, as I put down here, is the verb to walk. And here it ends in usin because they are doing it, and we know that they is the men, because the men are in the nominative. So the men walk or are walking with the women. Number 4 was metaten namachian chai triereis prostem polim pleusin. You should have translated this one as, after the naval battle, the triremes sailed towards the city. We know that it means this because here meta is governing the accusative, and so meta here must mean after. And so after, and the thing that it's after is ten naumachian, which is the naval battle in the accusative singular. So after the naval battle, hai triereis, these are the triremes in the nominative plural, which we know from the form of the definite article and also from the ending. The triremes are doing the action, but we'll get to the action in a moment because first we've got another prepositional phrase, pros ten polin. Pros here is governing the accusative, so it means towards or to, and ten polin is the accusative prepositional object, meaning the city. So this means towards the city, and then we've got the verb at the end, pleusin. Pleusin is they sail. We know what is doing the sailing, namely
the triremes.
So it's
the triremes
sail towards the city, which gave us overall, after the naval battle, the triremes sail towards the city. Number 5 is ta kremata ta prostunautu uk echor. You should have translated this one as, I do not have the money from the sailor. We know that it means this because firstly we've got ta kremata, meaning the money or the goods. You could have said the goods. And here it's in either the nominative plural or accusative plural. We need to look at the rest of the sentence to tell which of those it is. Now ta is the next thing, okay? And that is a repeated definite article, which we can see because there is no other neuter plural noun after it. There's pros, the preposition pros. And so it's a repeated definite article, as I said, being used to deploy a prepositional phrase. So this phrase is telling us something more about the money or the goods, okay? And it's telling us that they're the ones, literally, but we would say the money or the goods, pros tu nautu, from the sailor. We know that pros means from here because it governs the genitive. Tu nautu is genitive singular. So far we've got the money from the sailor, and then we've got uk echor. Uk is not, and echor is I have, or I hold. So this is I do not have, or am not holding, the money or the goods from the sailor. Number 6 is ar ich tuas en toi hudati horate. You should have translated this one as, do you see fish in the water? We know that it means this because ar is an elided form of arra, as I've already explained, and it therefore indicates that this is a yes or no question. That it's a question is also confirmed by the semicolon at the end. Then we have ich tuas, which is fish in the accusative plural. We know that from the ending uas, which for 3H nouns is the accusative plural ending, or one of the accusative plural endings, I should say, because there are 2 for 3H nouns. So fish must be the direct object. Then we've got en toi hudati. We've got a prepositional phrase. En governs the dative. Here's the prepositional object in the dative, so this means in the water. And then we have the verb horate, at the end, that's hora plus ete. Ete is the you plural ending for verbs in or in the present indicative active, and therefore this means you plural see, but it's a question, so we would say, do you plural see fish in the water? Now, you don't have to specify that it's plural in your translation, but as a translator reading the Greek, you know that that question is being asked of a group of people. Somebody's asking a group of people if they see fish in the water. Number 7 is hos strategos diaton noson apotneiske. You should have translated this one as, the general is dying because of the illness, or on account of the illness, or on account of the plague, or on account of the disease. And you could have said dies rather than is dying. We know that it means this because the general is at the start in the nominative singular. Hos strategos is nominative singular, which means that he is doing the action, which we shall come to at the end of the sentence. But before that, we've got a prepositional phrase, dia ton noson. Dia plus the accusative means because of, or on account of. And the thing that something is happening because of or on account of here is ton noson. Nosos is a 2a noun meaning illness, disease, or plague. So we've got the general on account of or because of the plague, the disease, or the illness. He is apotneiske. Apotneisko is the verb to die. Here it ends in a because he, she, or it is doing the action. It's third person singular, and we know who that he is, namely the general. So the general dies or is dying because of the illness. Number 8 is oi moi, hoi stratiotai ekton skernon korusin. You should have translated this one as, oh no, the soldiers are coming out of the tents, or out of the huts, you could have said. We know that it means this because oi moi is oh no, or an equivalent phrase. Hoi stratiotai means the soldiers, and they're in the nominative plural, which we know from the form of the definite article, and also from the ending. Then we have ek torn skernorn. This is a prepositional phrase. We've got a preposition plus the prepositional object. Ek means out of or from, and it governs the genitive. And the thing that something is coming from here is torn skernorn. Skerner means hut or tent. Here it's genitive plural, so this means out of or from the huts or the tents. And the verb is korusin, which is the verb to come or to go. So you could have said are going out of the tents if you wanted to. Anyway, overall we now know then that it's oh no, the soldiers are coming or are going out of or from the tents. Number 9 is hodespotes kai hodulos dia tu potamu bainusin. You should have translated this one as, the master and the slave are going through the river. We know that it means this because we had the master and the slave in the nominative singular, and they were joined by kai here, kai meaning and. So they're both the subject, they're both doing the action. And we got the action at the end, but before that we had a prepositional phrase, dia tu potamu. Dia plus the genitive means through. And so the thing that something's going through goes in the genitive, and that thing is tu potamu. Namely, the river. Potamos means river, it's a 2a noun. And so we've got the master and the slave. Through the river, we're told they are bainusin. Bainor's the verb to go. Here it ends in usin because they are doing it. So the master and the slave are going or go through the river. Finally, number 10 is prostoi limeni mene mantis. You should have translated this one as, the prophet is staying near the harbour, or the prophet stays near the harbour, stays at the harbour, remains near the harbour. There's different ways you could have translated this. You could have said seer rather than prophet. There is room for variety here, okay? Now, why did it mean this, or an equivalent translation? Well, prostoi limeni is a prepositional phrase. pros here is governing the dative, since the prepositional object here is in the dative. Now when pros governs the dative, it means at or near. At least those are the two meanings we've learned so far. And here we've got the harbour. So this means at the harbour or near the harbour. And next we're given the verb mene. Menor means to stay or remain. Here it ends in a because he, she or it is doing the action, but we don't know who that he, she or it is yet until we get to her mantis, which is in the nominative singular. So her mantis, the prophet or the seer, is the one doing the staying or remaining. So the prophet or the seer stays near the harbour or at the harbour. Okay, to summarise our learning for this lesson, we learned that prepositions are words that apply to nouns or pronouns and express relations in terms of space, time, or something more abstract, such as causation. We also learned that Greek prepositions govern cases. We learned what that means, and we also learned that most prepositions can govern more than one case. We also learned about case feel. We learned that the accusative has the case feel of motion towards, or an arrow, if expressed visually. The genitive has the case feel of motion away from, or a circle with an arrow coming out of it, if expressed visually. And the dative has the case feel of position, or a dot, if expressed visually. We also learned a lot of prepositions. A couple of these had featured in my lessons before, namely pros plus the accusative and n plus the dative, but we've learned quite a lot of new ones too. And in the next lesson, we shall learn even more, so please do tune in to the next lesson for those. In addition, we've learned two new verbs, badisdor, meaning walk, and menor, meaning stay or remain. And lastly, we learned two new nouns also. We learned nosos, meaning illness, plague or disease, and potamos, meaning river, which I had mentioned before but hadn't prescribed as a noun to learn. And both of those are 2A nouns. With that said, let me say thank you very much for watching the video. Please do give it a like if you found it useful, and leave a comment if you have any feedback at all. But for now though, I need to say thank you very much once again for watching, and I shall see you again next time.